The evening rush at Golden Dragon Restaurant was in full swing. Mai balanced 3 steaming plates of kung pao chicken in one hand while deftly maneuvering between closely packed tables. The familiar aroma of ginger and garlic filled the air as she delivered the dishes with a practiced smile. "Careful, the plates are hot," she reminded her customers, just as she had done hundreds of times before. The restaurant buzzed with life. Business people unwinding after long office hours, families celebrating small victories, and college students seeking comfort in affordable meals. Through it all, Mai moved with grace, her feet aching in her non-slip shoes, her order pad stuffed with tickets in her apron pocket. But every few minutes, her eyes would drift to the corner of the restaurant where an old upright piano sat. Its dark wood was dulled by years of dust, yet it held a quiet dignity. The piano was a remnant from decades ago, when this place was the Blue Note Jazz Club, before Mr. Lee turned it into the Golden Dragon. Sometimes, when the evening light hit it just right, Mai could almost hear the ghost of old jazz tunes floating through the air. "Table 7 needs more hot sauce," called out Uncle Wong from behind the counter. Mai snapped back to reality, quickly grabbing the bottle and weaving through the dinner crowd. Her hands were meant for more than carrying plates and scribbling orders, but bills needed to be paid. 5 years of classical piano training at the music school seemed like a distant dream now. Between refilling water glasses and processing credit card payments, Mai found herself unconsciously moving her fingers, playing imaginary keys on her serving tray. Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, the last piece she'd mastered before everything changed. A regular customer caught her doing this and smiled knowingly, but Mai quickly busied herself with clearing empty plates. The kitchen doors swung open with a bang as Lynn, the other waitress, rushed out with more orders. "Mai, can you help with the big party in the corner? I'm swamped." The restaurant had gotten even busier, if that was possible. Mai nodded, tucking away her musical thoughts for later. As the evening wore on, Mai's feet grew heavier, but her smile never faltered. She'd learned that genuine kindness made the job easier, and the tips better. While dealing with a mix-up over a spicy beef order, she caught sight of her reflection in the restaurant's front window. In her black pants and white shirt, with her hair tied back neatly, she looked every bit the professional server. Nobody would guess that her fingers could dance across piano keys, creating magic with Beethoven and Mozart. The old piano seemed to watch her as she worked, like a friend waiting patiently. During slower moments, Mai would imagine herself sitting at those keys, drawing out melodies that had been trapped inside her for too long. But for now, she had orders to take, tables to clean, and customers to serve. Near closing time, as the dining room finally began to empty, Mai heard something that made her pause. From someone's phone speaker came the delicate notes of Debussy's Clair de Lune. Her heart tightened. It was the piece she'd been practicing when everything fell apart. She closed her eyes for just a moment, letting the familiar melody wash over her. "Mai." Uncle Wong's voice broke through her reverie. "Last table needs their check." She hurried to finish her tasks, but that melody stayed with her, humming in her mind like a reminder of something lost, or perhaps just waiting to be found again. As she wiped down her last table for the night, her gaze returned to the piano. Maybe someday, she thought. Maybe someday soon. The kitchen staff had already left for the night, their usual chatter replaced by the gentle hum of the refrigerators. Mai stood alone in the dimly lit restaurant, running a cloth over the last few tables. The streets outside had grown quiet, with only occasional cars passing by, their headlights casting moving shadows through the front windows. She glanced at the clock. 11:45 p.m. Uncle Wong had trusted her with closing duties months ago, telling her to just make sure everything was locked up tight. What he didn't know was that these quiet moments after closing had become her secret sanctuary. Mai's heart beat a little faster as she approached the old piano in the corner. During the day, it served as a glorified shelf where customers sometimes placed their bags or drinks, much to her silent dismay. But at night, it transformed into something magical. Her hands trembled slightly as she lifted the dusty cover. The keys weren't perfectly white anymore. Time had yellowed them like old photographs. But to Mai, they were more beautiful than ever. She sat down on the bench, adjusting it with practiced care to avoid the squeaky spot. The first notes of Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata floated through the empty restaurant. May closed her eyes, letting her fingers remember what her mind had tried to forget. The melody started softly, like a whispered secret, then grew stronger as her confidence built. In these moments, she wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was the musician she'd always dreamed of being. A floorboard creaked behind her. May's fingers froze on the keys, her heart jumping into her throat. She spun around to find Uncle Wong standing there in his cooking apron, a ring of keys in his hand. She hadn't heard him come down from his upstairs apartment. "I'm so sorry," May stammered, quickly standing up. "I know I shouldn't have." "Why did you stop?" Uncle Wong asked softly. His face, usually stern while managing the restaurant, had softened into something Mai had never seen before. I was just. May struggled to find the right words. Uncle Wong walked over to the piano, his hand gently touching its wooden frame. "You know, this piano has been sitting here for 15 years, collecting dust. My wife used to play it." Mai blinked in surprise. In all her time working at Golden Dragon, she'd never heard him mention a wife. "She was a concert pianist in Shanghai," he continued, his voice taking on a distant quality. "When we moved here, she insisted we keep a piano. Said a home wasn't a home without music." He paused, looking at the keys. "She passed away 12 years ago. Since then, nobody has played it properly. Until now." May stood quietly, processing this revelation. Uncle Wong reached into his pocket and pulled out an old brass key. "The piano needs someone to play it," he said, holding out the key. "Music isn't meant to be locked away. Neither are talents." His eyes met hers knowingly. "You play beautifully, just like she did." Mai took the key with trembling fingers, feeling its weight in her palm. It was more than just a key to a piano. It was permission to dream again. "Tomorrow night," Uncle Wong said as he turned to leave, "play something happy. Mai Lin, my wife, she always said sad songs are for mornings, happy ones for nights." He smiled, then added, "And maybe we can clean this old piano properly on Sunday. It deserves to shine again." After he left, May sat back down at the piano, her fingers hovering over the keys. This time, she played a light, joyful Chinese melody she remembered from childhood. As the notes danced through the empty restaurant, she could have sworn she saw Uncle Wong wiping his eyes as he climbed back upstairs. Sometimes, she realized, the most precious gifts come wrapped in the most ordinary moments. And sometimes, they come with a brass key and the echo of someone else's memories. The lunch rush was just winding down when he walked in again. May recognized him immediately. The music professor who always ordered the same thing: pot and sour soup, followed by vegetable lo mein, no bean sprouts. He'd been coming to Golden Dragon every Tuesday for the past 3 months, always sitting at table 12, always bringing a stack of papers to grade. Today, though, something was different. As Mai approached with her usual greeting, she noticed he wasn't alone. A young girl, maybe 7 or 8, sat across from him, swinging her legs under the table and clutching a worn music book. "The usual, Professor Chen?" Mai asked, pulling out her notepad. He smiled warmly. "Yes, please. And chicken fried rice for my student here." He gestured to the girl. "We just finished her piano lesson, and I promised her lunch as a reward for mastering her scales." May's eyes caught the title of the music book: Basic Piano Techniques, Level 2. Her heart did a little jump. She'd had the same book when she was young. As she turned to put in their order, the professor spoke again. "I couldn't help but notice. You hum classical pieces while you work. Chopin's nocturnes, mostly. Do you play?" Mai froze for a moment, then turned back slowly. I used to, she admitted. A long time ago. The young girl perked up. Really? What's your favorite piece to play? Before Mai could answer, another customer called for her attention. I'll be right back with your drinks, she said quickly, hurrying away. But throughout her shift, she kept glancing back at table 12, where the professor was now helping his student with what looked like music theory homework. When she brought their food, the professor introduced himself properly. I'm Dr. Chen, by the way. I teach at the Central Music Conservatory downtown. He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. We're actually looking for someone to help with our beginner piano classes. Nothing too demanding, just 2 evenings a week. Mag nearly dropped the soy sauce she was setting down. Oh, I couldn't possibly, she began, but Uncle Wong, who was passing by with a teapot, suddenly joined the conversation. May plays beautifully, he said, his eyes twinkling. Every night after closing. The restaurant hasn't had such good music since my Mylin. Dr. Chen's eyes lit up. Would you play something for us now? Mai looked around nervously. The lunch crowd had thinned out, with only a few tables still occupied. Uncle Wong nodded encouragingly. Just one short piece, Dr. Chen said. Think of it as an informal interview. Heart pounding, Mai walked to the piano. As she sat down, she noticed the keys were gleaming. Uncle Wong had kept his word about cleaning it. Her fingers found their position, and before she could talk herself out of it, she began to play. She chose Debussy's Arabesque No. 1. Not too showy, but beautiful in its simplicity. As she played, the remaining customers fell silent. Even the kitchen staff peeked out to listen. The music filled the restaurant, dancing between the tables like sunlight. When she finished, there was a moment of complete silence before applause broke out. Mai felt her cheeks grow warm as she stood up. That was so pretty, the young girl exclaimed. Can you be my teacher too? Dr. Chen pulled out a business card and wrote something on the back. The position pays $15 per hour, he said, sliding the card across the table. And we could really use someone with your talent. Mai took the card with trembling fingers, staring at the elegant text, Central Music Conservatory, where dreams take flight. Think about it, Dr. Chen said gently. Sometimes life gives us second chances. We just have to be brave enough to take them. As Mai tucked the card into her apron pocket, she caught Uncle Wong's eye. He was smiling, and for a moment, she could have sworn she saw tears in his eyes. Perhaps some dreams don't die. They just wait patiently for the right moment to come alive again. Mai sat at her tiny kitchen table, staring at Dr. Chen's business card while her cup of tea grew cold. The morning sun filtered through her apartment's single window, casting a warm glow on the stack of bills beside her. Her phone screen showed 5 missed calls from her mother. She knew exactly what those were about. Last night's conversation still echoed in her mind. A music teacher. May, we didn't come to this country for you to chase foolish dreams again. Her mother's voice had carried that familiar mix of disappointment and concern. The restaurant job is stable. Safe. Remember what happened last time. Mai did remember. 10 years ago, at her final recital, she had frozen on stage. The spotlights had seemed too bright, the audience too large, her dreams too big. She'd run off stage in tears, never to perform publicly again. Until yesterday. The morning shift wouldn't start for another 2 hours. Mai pulled out her old practice notebook from the bottom drawer of her dresser. The pages were yellowed now, filled with her teenage handwriting. Notes about finger positions, tempo markings, and her teacher's encouraging comments. A photograph fell out. 16-year-old May sitting at a grand piano, beaming with pride after winning a local competition. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was Lynn, her coworker from the restaurant. Hey, is it true? Are you really thinking about teaching at the conservatory? May sighed. News travels fast. Uncle Wong hasn't stopped talking about your performance yesterday. He's already telling customers they can request songs during dinner. Lin paused. You know, my sister's kid wants to learn piano. If you do teach. Maybe. A small smile crept across May's face. Let me figure things out first. After hanging up, Mai walked to her window. The street below was coming to life. Shopkeepers raising their shutters, early morning commuters hurrying to catch their buses. Her eyes landed on the music store across the street, where she'd spent countless afternoons as a teenager, dreaming in front of the grand pianos she could never afford. Her phone buzzed one more time. A text from Uncle Wong. The piano misses you this morning, but maybe it's happy knowing you might help other young pianists find their music. May's vision blurred with unexpected tears. She thought about the young girl from yesterday, her eyes bright with excitement watching May play. She thought about her own younger self, how music had made her feel like she could touch the sky. Opening her laptop, Mai pulled up her old resume. Under skills, she had always listed only practical things. Experienced in customer service, proficient in point-of-sale systems, fluent in Mandarin and English. Now, her fingers hovering over the keyboard, she typed, Classical piano training, 10 years experience. The morning light grew stronger, warming her face. In the distance, she could hear the city waking up, its urban symphony of traffic and voices and life. Maybe her mother was right about stability and safety. But as May thought about the professor's words, sometimes life gives us second chances, she realized that some risks were worth taking. She picked up her phone and dialed the number on the business card. Her heart was racing, but her voice was steady. Hello, Dr. Chen. This is Mai, from Golden Dragon. About the teaching position. I'd like to try. As she spoke those words, she felt something shift inside her, like the first notes of a new piece, waiting to be played. The bills were still on her table, her mother's concerns still echoed in her mind, but for the first time in years, Mai felt like she was finally writing her own melody. The conservatory's practice room felt like stepping into another world. May stood in the doorway, taking in the sight of the upright piano, much newer than the one at Golden Dragon, its black surface gleaming under fluorescent lights. 5 small chairs were arranged in a semicircle, waiting for her first group of students. Nervous? Dr. Chen asked, appearing beside her with a stack of beginner music books. A little, May admitted, smoothing her skirt for the 10th time. She'd bought it specially for teaching, along with a proper blouse, quite different from her waitress uniform. They're just kids, he reminded her gently. And they're probably more nervous than you are. Right on cue, a small face peeked around the doorframe. It was little May, the girl from the restaurant, now clutching her mother's hand. Look, Mom, that's the waitress who plays like an angel. Mai couldn't help but smile. Over the next few minutes, 4 more students arrived, all beginners, all around 7 or 8 years old. Their parents hovered uncertainly by the door until Dr. Chen shooed them away with practiced ease. Now then, May said, her voice shaking slightly as she faced her first class. Who wants to make some music? To her surprise, teaching came naturally. She showed them how to sit properly, how to position their small hands on the keys. When little Mai struggled with a simple scale, May remembered how her own first teacher had used a story about climbing stairs to explain the notes. The children giggled as May made each note an adventure. Remember, she told them, every great pianist started exactly where you are now. The hour flew by. Before she knew it, parents were returning to collect their children. Miss Mai, little May called out as she left, will you play something for us next time? Of course, May promised, her heart warm with unexpected joy. Later that evening, back at Golden Dragon, Mai moved between tables with a new lightness in her step. Her fingers, which had spent years carrying plates, had remembered their true purpose today, bringing music to life. How was it? Uncle Wong asked during a quiet moment. Different than I expected, May replied, thinking about how little May's face had lit up when she played her first complete scale. Better, actually. The dinner rush was starting when May noticed something unusual. A small group had gathered near the piano, looking at her expectantly. Uncle Wong appeared with a knowing smile. They heard about our waitress, who teaches at the conservatory now, he explained. They're hoping for a small performance with their dinner. May's old fear flickered for a moment, but then she thought about her students, how they trusted her, how they weren't afraid to make mistakes while learning. Taking a deep breath, she nodded. As she sat down at the familiar old piano, Mai felt different than before. This wasn't a formal recital or an audition. This was simply sharing what she loved. Her fingers found the keys, and she began to play a gentle Chinese melody her grandmother used to hum. The restaurant's usual dinner chaos softened. Conversations quieted. Even the kitchen staff paused to listen. When she finished, the applause was warm and genuine. One elderly customer wiped tears from her eyes, saying it reminded her of home. See? Uncle Wong said softly as Mai returned to her serving duties. Some dreams don't ask us to choose. They just ask us to be brave enough to let them grow in their own way. That night, after her shift, Mai stayed late to practice. She had promised her students a performance after all. As she played, she thought about how life sometimes takes unexpected turns. Here she was, still carrying plates, still wearing her serving apron. But now her heart was carrying a melody too. And somehow, that made all the difference. The letter arrived on a busy Thursday evening. Maya was refilling water glasses when Uncle Wong called her to the kitchen, his face unusually serious. He held an official-looking envelope with the bank's logo. They're raising the rent, he said quietly, away from the other staff. By 40%. We have 3 months to either pay the new amount, or... His voice trailed off, but May understood. In a neighborhood where old family businesses were disappearing one by one, replaced by shiny new cafes, this news felt inevitable. May's eyes went to the piano in the corner. Their piano, now clean and well-loved, where she still played every night after closing. Where her students sometimes came to practice when the conservatory rooms were full. Where little Mai had just last week played her first complete song, beaming with pride while her parents recorded it on their phones. What can we do? Mai asked, watching the dinner crowd through the kitchen window. These weren't just customers anymore. They were her audience, her supporters, her community. Uncle Wong sighed, looking older than Mai had ever seen him. I've saved some, but not enough. And the banks? He shook his head. They don't give loans easily to old restaurants. That night, after the last customer left, May sat at the piano, but didn't play. Her mind was racing. The restaurant wasn't just Uncle Wong's livelihood. It was home to so many memories. It was where she'd found her music again. She pulled out her phone and called Dr. Chen. A fundraising concert. He repeated after she explained her idea. At the restaurant. Yes, May said, her voice growing stronger. We could sell tickets, serve special dishes. Make it a real event. Some of my students could perform too. Show their parents what they've learned. There was a pause. You realize you'd have to perform as well? In front of a full house? May's stomach tightened. Her last public performance had ended in disaster. But then she thought about little May, who had been so scared to play in front of her classmates until Mai told her that being nervous just meant you cared about something deeply. Yes, she said. I'll perform. The next few weeks passed in a blur. Dr. Chen helped spread the word through the conservatory. Uncle Wong's regular customers bought tickets before they were even printed. Even Lin volunteered to help organize, saying, "This place gave me my first job. It's time to give something back." Mai practiced during every free moment. Her mother, hearing about the concert, called again. But this time, her voice was different. "You're doing this to help others," she said softly. "That's not a foolish dream at all." The day before the concert, Mai found Uncle Wong standing by the piano, running his hand along its wooden frame. Mai Lin would have loved this, he said. She always said music brings people together in ways nothing else can. Tell me about her, Mai said, sitting down at the piano. What was her favorite song to play? Uncle Wong's eyes misted over. She loved the Yellow River Piano Concerto. Said it reminded her of home, but also of hope. Mai nodded, her fingers finding the keys. Then that's what I'll play tomorrow. As she began practicing the piece, she noticed Uncle Wong pull out an old photograph from his wallet. In it, a young woman sat at this very piano, her smile radiant, her hands poised over the keys. Outside, the evening traffic hummed, and somewhere in the kitchen, pots and pans clattered as the staff prepared for tomorrow's event. Mai played on, letting the music fill every corner of the restaurant. Each note felt like a promise, to Uncle Wong, to her students, to herself. Tomorrow would be more than just a fundraiser. It would be a reminder that sometimes the most beautiful melodies are born from our deepest challenges. The evening of the fundraiser, Golden Dragon looked different. Red paper lanterns hung from the ceiling, casting a warm glow over the tables that had been rearranged to face the piano. The regular menu had been replaced by a special banquet selection, and the air smelled of Uncle Wong's finest dishes. Mai stood in the kitchen, peeking through the window at the growing crowd. Her students had arrived early, dressed in their best clothes, clutching their sheet music. Little Mai was practicing her piece one last time on the table edge, her fingers moving silently through the motions. "Your mother's here," Lin whispered, appearing beside Mai with a tray of appetizers. Mai's heart jumped. She hadn't expected her to come. Through the kitchen window, she saw her mother being seated near the front, her posture stiff, but her eyes scanning the room with quiet interest. Uncle Wong gathered everyone in the kitchen for a final word. The staff, who had volunteered to work for free tonight, huddled close. "Remember," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "tonight we're not just serving food. We're serving memories." The evening began with Mai's youngest students performing simple pieces they'd learned. The audience applauded warmly for each one, no matter how many small mistakes were made. Little Mai played her piece perfectly, beaming as her parents wiped proud tears from their eyes. Between performances, servers brought out course after course of Uncle Wong's special menu. The restaurant hummed with conversation and laughter. Mai moved between tables, no longer as a waitress, but as a host, introducing her students and their families to regular customers who had watched her own musical journey unfold. Finally, it was Mai's turn. As she walked to the piano, she caught her mother's eye. To her surprise, her mother gave her a small nod, the same nod she used to give before Mai's childhood recitals. The room fell silent as Mai sat down. She looked at the keys, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. The late-night practice sessions, the encouragement of Uncle Wong, the trust of her students, the warmth of this community that had become her family. She began to play the Yellow River Piano Concerto. The powerful notes filled the restaurant, telling a story of struggle and hope, of tradition and change, of fears overcome and dreams reborn. As she played, Mai felt something she hadn't felt in years, pure joy in the music. When the final notes faded, there was a moment of complete silence. Then the room erupted in applause. Uncle Wong was openly crying. Little Mai was jumping up and down. And Mai's mother, her strict, practical mother, was standing, clapping with tears in her eyes. After the applause died down, Uncle Wong stepped forward. "Thanks to your generosity tonight," he announced, his voice shaking, "Golden Dragon will stay open. But more than the money you've given, you've helped us remember something important, that this place is more than a restaurant. It's a home where dreams can come true." As the evening wound down, Mai found herself back at the piano, playing softer tunes while guests lingered over dessert. Her mother approached, carrying a small box. "I found this in our old house," she said quietly, opening the box to reveal a faded ribbon. May's first piano competition award. Perhaps it's time to display it again. Later that night, after the last guest left, May sat alone at the piano. The restaurant was quiet except for the distant sound of Lynn and the others cleaning up. On the wall now hung a new photograph next to the old one of Mai Lin, a picture of Mai performing that evening, her face glowing with joy. Uncle Wong had been right. Some dreams don't make you choose. Sometimes they just wait patiently, like a familiar melody, ready to be played again when the time is right. Mai placed her hands on the keys and began to play a gentle tune. Not for an audience this time, but for herself, for the restaurant, for all the dreams that had found their way home. Outside, the city lights twinkled, and inside Golden Dragon, the music played on.